friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do my March and April wrap up. March was a strange month, but I vlogged all of it, and you can go watch my Twilight Stan Reads Classic Vampire Books reading vlog. I'm not going to talk about those books today because I read them in March and April, and I talk about them in extreme detail in the vlog, so you can go watch that if you're curious. I will mention what I read and what I rated it, but I won't be going into detail. What I will be talking about is the other books that I read in the months of March and April. I managed to read 5 other books, so I feel like that's a pretty good accomplishment considering I was barely reading anything in January and February. So the first book I read in March was Carmilla by Sheridan Joseph Le Fanu, and that is in the vampire vlog. It was one of the first vampire books to ever come out, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's like super classic vampire literature, super gothic, love the characters, etc. Next book I read was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. Actually, all of the books that I'm going to talk about I gave 5 out of 5 stars. It was just a good couple months for non-vampire books. The Fifth Season is like totally modern classic fantasy. If you love fantasy, you have to read this. It's just, I love N.K. Jemisin. I think she's one of my favorite authors. This is the 3rd book I've read of hers, but I just absolutely love her writing. I think she's a really fantastic writer. Also, like, it's just different from the like typical white old men fantasy that we think of as classic fantasy. So I also find her books like kind of refreshing. But if you didn't know, The Fifth Season takes place on like an Earth-like world where these people have magic, and in most communities they're not welcome because usually their power is like very unhoned, very chaotic. So any little like outburst of emotion that they might have causes them to use their power, which can trigger very crazy earthquakes throughout the world, and can also trigger these like seasons. And there's different types of seasons. There's dry seasons, there's snowy seasons, there's like volcanic fire seasons, and you never really know what you're gonna get. Throughout the book they're more explained, but this follows 3 women. It follows a young girl, follows like a young adult, and it follows an older woman, and it follows those 3 women as they experience a season after this like really horrific earthquake happens, and kind of what they do after or before it. So it's just like really smart writing. It's really like beautiful writing. It like pulls you in almost right away. It kind of reminded me a little bit of This Is How You Lose the Time War. Not in content at all, but just in like the way that the story is told and the events that take place and like the order they take place in. Yeah, it's just, I can't say too much about it because I loved reading this without knowing a lot about it. Obviously, a lot of people really, really love this book, and I think they're right. I agree with all of them. And then I read Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice, and I gave this like a 2.5, 3 out of 5 stars. I've seen the movie, so I kind of knew what I was getting into when I went to read the book. Yeah, it was a very interesting time. It's a very interesting book. It's like more erotic than I thought it would be. And I also like hated most parts about it. I don't know. You can go watch my video if you want to know more about that. And then I read Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I freaking loved this so much. It's so beautiful, also haunting and uncanny, and I just loved it so much. And this is the illustrated edition, and honestly, if you're willing to pay like the over $30 that I paid for this, it's totally worth it. But yeah, I think this is a beautifully written story. It's about a man who comes back to where he grew up for a funeral, and between the funeral and the like, where you know, like you go to a funeral and then if it's in a church you like go to the basement, eat finger sandwiches, and and if it's not, then you like go to someone's house and like eat a lot of KFC. So in between those, he goes back, he's on his way to his childhood home, he goes past a friend's house that he used to spend a lot of time with, and when he gets there, her mom is there, and they start talking about her and the adventures that they had together and the pond that they had that she always called her ocean, even though it was just a pond. This is a like fabulism type of book, and I really need to read more of Neil Gaiman and also more like magical realism fabulism type of books, because just like I love the uncanny nature of it. It reminds me so much of like dreams that I have. I don't know if you guys experience a lot of strange, vivid, nightmarish dreams, but it's like a dream you have where everything is really familiar, but it's off by just a little bit. Like Coraline, which is a Neil Gaiman book, is like that. And that's basically the definition of uncanny, is that something is like beautiful and familiar, but it's also really haunting and different at the same time, but you're still drawn to it. That's what reading this is like. And then I read 4 more vampire books. I read Twilight by Stephenie Meyer, which obviously is a book that I'm very attached to. Usually I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. I actually ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars this time around. This obviously shows like my chaoticness with like mood reading and noticing different things when it comes to reading books, but I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because I noticed a few things that I had never noticed before, and it kind of changed my perspective on Stephenie Meyer as a writer. I noticed something about the epigraph, and it like completely made my brain explode. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Obviously I'm very nostalgic about it, and that's always gonna cloud the way that I rate it, but I also noticed the like deeply problematic things that the entire series has. But yeah, I kind of think that Stephenie Meyer, though she has written extremely like racist and problematic things, I think she's a bit of a smarter writer than people typically will give her credit for. Then I read Fevre Dream by George R.R. Martin. I had no idea that George R.R. Martin had a vampire book. I enjoyed this one enough. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It is deeply, deeply racist, but because it was written in the 70s and it takes place in the 1950s along the Mississippi River, it's not meant to make you uncomfortable. So it's very racist, but I think what George R.R. Martin did with vampirism and the lore that he builds and the world that he builds is like really, really, really fantastic. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And then I read Dead Until Dark by Charlaine Harris. I gave this a 1 out of 5 stars. I hated it a lot. It's problematic and the writing sucks, and I hated the narration and the main character, and I didn't like the plot, and I didn't like any of the characters. So it was just overall for me a bad book. Then I read Fledgling by Octavia E. Butler. I gave this one a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I was very disappointed by it. It was one of the only vampire books I could find that had any kind of diversity in it. And unfortunately, I was just disappointed by the overall writing and narration of the book. I thought the rest of it was really smart. I enjoyed that aspect of it, and just unfortunately I just didn't really like it that much. And last but certainly not least, I reread the entire Cruel Prince trilogy. I've only read this once before, obviously, because the last book just came out in November of 2019. But a friend of mine was rereading these and he was talking about them, and I was like, God, I gotta reread them. I gave them all a 5 out of 5 stars. I think this is a really, really fantastic series. And I don't think Holly Black gets enough credit for how wonderful of a writer she is. I think that the way that she builds worlds and develops characters is really good. And the way that she can do it so smoothly throughout 3 books, I think is really a testament to how good of a writer she is. It's one of those series where by the end of the last book, there's characters that you start to have a lot of respect for that you never thought you would. Things like that, where it's just like, yeah, she's a really good writer, and I love the world that she builds in all of her Fae books. I've read these, I've read The Darkest Part of the Forest. I've yet to read the Modern Fairy trilogy. I feel like a lot of people have talked about The Cruel Prince enough that thankfully I don't have to explain every single thing about it, because I'm very bad at that, if you haven't noticed. Okie dokie, so those are all the books, plus a few more, that I read in the month of March and April. I think had I not been filming a reading vlog, and I hadn't expected to film that reading vlog in both months, that you would have seen separate monthly wrap-ups, but it just didn't work out that way, unfortunately. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know, have you read any of these? Do you want to read any of these? Give me your thoughts. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Of course, I would love for you to hit the like button if you liked it and subscribe if you have not already. And I will see you guys very soon in the next one. Bye.